Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're digging into the Warlocks Motorcycle Club,
Mm,
specifically the Florida group, and how they became this international thing.
right. We've got some interesting material here, basically excerpts from a PDF doc about them.
And our mission for you, listening in, is to get a solid handle on who these guys are, the key stuff, the milestones, without drowning in like every single tiny detail.
Exactly. We want to give you that focus picture, where they came from, what their patches look like, how they grew, and some of the big moments, good or bad, based on what we've read.
Okay, so let's jump right in. The source says the Warlocks MC, it started back in 1967, Jacksonville Beach, Florida.
Yeah. And the founder, Tom Grubb Freeland, he was an ex-U.S. Navy guy. But the really interesting part is where the idea first sparked.
Oh, yeah. Not on a bike.
No, it was actually conceived February 67 out on the Mediterranean Sea.
Whoa, okay.
There were 13 sailors aboard the USS Shangri-La, and they started talking about it during a deployment, planning for after the Navy.
You can almost picture that, can't you? Finding that connection, wanting something more after service.
Definitely. And the initial plan was pretty ambitious, actually. Each one of those 13 guys was supposed to go back home and start their own chapter.
13 chapters right off the bat. That's a lot.
It was big vision. But you know how plans go. It ended up being Grubb Freeland who actually made it happen. He founded that first original chapter near Orlando.
Ah, okay. So Orlando became the core.
Exactly. And it's still the mother chapter today. That's pretty significant.
Our source also mentions they're sometimes called the Phoenix Warlocks or Florida Warlocks.
Yeah, that seems likely. Probably to distinguish them from maybe other groups or just to highlight their origin as they expanded.
Makes sense. Now, how do they identify themselves?
Well, they call themselves an Outlaw Motorcycle Club and a one percenter club.
Right, the one percenter thing. That comes from the idea that 99% of motorcyclists are law-abiding, and this group is not necessarily part of that 99%.
Precisely. It's a statement about operating outside conventional norms, and they've definitely grown beyond Florida. The info shows 55 chapters.
55 across how many countries?
4, actually. The U.S., obviously, Canada, England, and Germany. Quite a spread from that shipboard conversation.
That's huge. And their look, the insignia.
Very distinct. A blazing phoenix, right? Set between a top and bottom rocker patch.
The rockers showing the name and territory.
Exactly. And the colors are bold, too. Crimson, red, yellow, and black. You'd notice it.
Yeah, sounds like it. They also have some pretty direct mottos.
Oh, yeah. There's, our business is none of your fucking business.
Yeah.
Very clear message there.
Can't miss that one. And the other.
Warlocks forever. Forever Warlocks. They often shorten it to WFFW. Speaks to that internal loyalty.
Definitely. Privacy and loyalty seem key. So where do they fit in the bigger picture, according to law enforcement?
Well, agencies tend to put them in the second tier of outlaw clubs. So after the really big ones, the big 4, like Hells Angels, Outlaws, Pagans, Banditos.
Okay, so not the absolute top tier, but still significant enough to be on the radar.
Very much so. They have a substantial presence. And being in that space sometimes leads to friction.
Right. The source mentions rivalries, with the outlaws and the pagans specifically.
Yeah, that's pretty common in this world. Conflicts over territory, history, maybe recruitment, that kind of thing.
Okay, so let's talk about that growth. Where are these 55 chapters mostly?
A lot are in the U.S., heavily concentrated in the Southeast. Florida alone has 14, based on this source. Then South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia have a good number too.
But not just the Southeast.
No, it stretches up the coast, New York, New Jersey, and into the Midwest too. Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Minnesota, and then of course those international ones we mentioned. Canada, England, Germany.
It shows real reach. And what about these nomads?
Ah, yeah. Nomads are members who aren't tied to a specific chapter's territory. They might live or work in states where there isn't an official chapter, but they're still full members. It kind of shows their network extends even beyond the formal chapter locations.
Interesting. Now, inevitably, with outlaw clubs, there are often run-ins with the law. Our source mentions a big ATF investigation back in 91.
That's right. And it's a complex one. It involved an undercover ATF agent, Stephen Martin.
Okay.
And while it led to arrests, the source does note that there were claims the illegal stuff was actually initiated by the agent himself. So that raises questions about entrapment.
Yeah, that complicates the picture. The source also points to a specific tragic event around that time, February 91, the murder of Raymond Bear Chaffin.
Yes, he was the president of the Smyrna Beach chapter down in Florida. And the timing and context are really significant.
How so?
Well, apparently Chapin was in some pretty serious talks at the time. Talks about potentially merging or aligning with the Hells Angels in Florida.
Really? And anything else?
Yeah, also about having another club, the Booze Fighters, patch over, basically become Warlocks. If those things had happened.
Oh,
Yeah, what had I meant? It could have potentially made the Warlocks one of the absolute biggest clubs in the world, maybe the biggest. But obviously with his murder, that didn't happen.
A real what-if moment. And the ATF used his funeral for a raid.
Yes. That raid was the culmination of the whole 13-month sting operation that Agent Martin had been running, using a funeral. It definitely highlights how intense things were.
Intense is one word for it. And the legal troubles didn't stop there, did they?
No, unfortunately not for them. There was another ATF investigation noted in 2003. More convictions followed that one, drugs, weapons charges.
And there's a specific case mentioned, right? Stephen Brown, Steve-O.
Yeah, from South Carolina. Convicted for trafficking a pretty large amount of meth, 400 grams or more. He got 25 years. And the source references articles from 2020 and 2023, so this is relatively current.
And it wasn't just in the U.S. Canada had issues, too.
Right. March 2014, up in Alberta, Drayton Valley, several Warlocks members and associates were arrested on weapons charges there.
Yeah.
So yeah, the international presence comes with international law enforcement attention, too.
So just to recap some key names that pop up in the source.
Okay, sure. You've got Tom Grubb Freeland, the original founder. He passed in 2019.
Then Raymond Bear Chaffin, the chapter president whose murder was such a pivotal moment.
Stephen Martin, the ATF undercover agent from that 901 sting.
And Stephen Brown, Steve-O, with that recent drug conviction.
Yeah, those are the main individuals highlighted in the material we looked at.
Okay, so wrapping our heads around it all, it starts with this bond between Navy guys.
Right, that post-service idea.
And it morphs into this international one-percenter club. Clear identity, the phoenix, the mottos.
Classified as second tier, but definitely a major player with this long history of expansion, but also, well, significant legal battles and controversies.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How does that initial desire for camaraderie, for a shared identity after service, evolve into something like this, an international organization with such a, let's say, complex reputation? What shifts inside a group for that to happen?
That's the core question, isn't it? What drives that kind of transformation? It's something for you, the listener, to really chew on.
And if you want to look further yourself, the source mentions their website, warlocks-mc.com, and an older archived one, warlockssmc.net.
Yeah, and also suggests checking out news archives, like from the Orlando Sentinel, which has apparently covered the club over the years, offers maybe a different angle.
All right, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Thanks for tuning in.
We'll catch you on the next one.